Hi, everyone. It's been a long time, it feels like, since we've been talking virtually together. But I've been thinking a lot about all that we learned together this spring and all I've had the opportunity to play with and experiment with and try with kids and teachers this summer. And I wanted to take some time to share with you some ideas that I think have been working well. And I'm hearing from teachers and students that they're working well with elementary students. I think one of the big things as I look back and reflect over the spring that I heard from kids and teachers again and again is how much they missed their classroom, that physical space, how much they missed their teacher, hearing their voice, seeing their face, and their classmates. And when I think back on that, they were really missing their community because they already had a classroom community to miss. And so while that was so hard to feel and experience with them throughout the spring, the beauty of that, right? The beautiful thing was that they had this community that meant so much to them. They had something to miss. And so it really had me thinking about how are we going to create that sense of community in this new year, given that we're really not certain what it's going to look like. What we are certain is that it's not going to be the way it typically is, whether we're in person, hybrid, or virtual. It's not going to look like anything we've seen. I've had a chance to start to go into some classrooms and plot out what that distance will look like. And it is going to be really, really different. So I think now more than ever, we have to really think about what's essential. What do we know is essential, whether we're in person or not in person? And how do we make sure that we know it's always worked for us and been essential in person? How do we bring that to life virtually or in a hybrid or in an in-person when we're socially distancing in person? And so I've had the privilege to collaborate with some teachers over the last few weeks to really play with and think about some of these things. And I wanted to share a few ideas with you, hopefully inspiration sparks, things that make you wonder and question so that you have some time to think and then use that to create your own. And I hope we continue to share, because the one thing I did learn from this spring is that we are truly better together when we share. So I began to think about some different ideas and what was important. And I think, one is the actual physical space. And at least in the spring, that physical space being predictable and familiar was really important. I heard kids say they wanted their teacher's chair. They wanted class puppets. They wanted the classroom to look like it's supposed to look and be familiar to them. So for our students in this upcoming year, while the physical classroom itself may be different, and they might not know that particular room if they were going in person because it's a new teacher, but they do know what to expect from a classroom. So really starting to think about what were those things and how could we begin to bring some of them to life kind of virtually. So one is if you're home, if you can get into your classroom and grab that teacher chair or the pointer that you used or any puppets that you use, like whatever those things were that are important to your kids, if you can grab them and have them so when you were doing this kind of a situation, you're using and you're sitting in the things that's familiar to them. So you know your room and you know what's important. Think about what will be important, and if it's virtual, try to bring that to life as well. The other creative thing that teachers have been doing, and I'm going to share my screen because, I have to say when I saw this, it was such fun, but I didn't really think about how to do that. I'm sorry, give me 1 minute. Sorry about that. I had the wrong screen open. All right, but these are all the things that you're dealing with day to day. But there is this thing called a Bitmoji classroom. So probably most of you have seen this. You probably all have these beautiful ones. But what I want to show is some ways to make it interactive. And I'm trying to think about it for the beginning of the year and to think about what are some of the things physically that we use all the time that kind of brings our kids together, And then what are some systems, structures, ways that we come together that we could also use either this, or there's so many ways to do this. So if you create something like this, you can save it as a JPEG and use it as your virtual background. If you are using Zoom, if you're in Google Classroom, you can use it as your regular background. You can also make it so that kids can interact with it. So let me show you what I mean by that. So if it were the beginning of the year, right, come August, September, whenever you're going back, I might think about what are the books I want my kids to explore, or I want to explore with my kids. And I want to put those in my virtual classroom here, right? So begin to think about things like The Day You Begin. It's a beautiful story. So often I want to think about books that are going to help kids remember what it's important to the beginning of the school year. So this is one type of book that I put here to help me remember. That's a text set I want to create. Grandma's Purse is a beautiful story of thinking about the important people and the important things in our lives and the memories we have. And I know a lot of us are thinking about personal narrative and sharing the stories of our lives when we come back. So I want to keep this book here to remind me to curate a text set that's going to bring those stories to life. Love of reading is something that I want to instill from day one in my classroom. So I want to make sure I curate a text set of books like the book tree that celebrates the love of reading and the importance of reading in one's life. Our kids, if they're going to be hybrid or virtual, and I hope this even comes to life if we're in person, but our passion projects, our inquiries, the things that are really important to us, we want to make sure we're letting our kids have those experiences. So I want to put a book like Whoosh here, which is the story of the creation of the Super Soaker, to allow our kids to think about what do they want to research, what do they want to learn more about, and what do they want to try to think about or create themselves. So this book will hopefully remind me to invite my kids and to create a text set or baskets of books that will inspire them. Hair Love is another beautiful text that I have for personal narrative. I also have that one because I want to remember to use a digital text and to layer my text into sets and use different modalities. So Hair Love also is a great short film. So I want to remember to expose my kids to lots of different types, which will be a great thing for me to think about. I also included Dictionary for a Better World. This is an absolutely beautiful book. It's a curation of poems that are about social justice and making a change in the world. It introduces readers to all different types of poems, important quotes, anecdotes, and stories, as well as poetry. It is an absolutely beautiful book to have on hand. And I have it to use that, but to also remind me to use poetry every day, to bring my readers together, and to have it also to be scaffolds for their writing. Each one of these in this room is interactive. So if kids were to click on it, it's hyperlinked and will take them to a read aloud or a book that they can read themselves. So a lot of these classrooms that you create now in Bitmoji are now interactive. So it's really fun for kids to sort of play with. So all of these books, if you link on them, will take you to either the physical book or a read aloud of that book or a video. I also want to make sure I have my kids getting into series at the beginning of the year, right? Getting them remembering what they love, right? Lifelong readers report being hooked in a series. So I want to think about some series that are right for your kids and put those out. And you might put them here because, again, once you click on those, it will hyperlink them to a digital bin of lots of books in that series for kids to explore. Other things that are often we do with our kids are our job chart. Right? We know that usually in our classroom, one of the things we do is think about like, how are we going to come together as a community and take care of one another? So again, when we hyperlink, this would take us to a virtual class job board. Right? I've put in some ideas that might work, right? You could still have someone who's in charge of doing the calendar just virtually. Instead of having a class monitor, you might have a chat monitor. Someone might be in charge of the chat and answering questions and making sure kids are doing and their group is doing what they should be doing. Some good news, this hyperlinks to the show that was going viral last spring, Some Good News, and kids could have their own version of Some Good News, and it could be someone's job each week to do that. You could have a class DJ, someone who's picking songs and have a day of the week or a time each day where kids are listening to music, dancing to music, moving to music. Someone could be taking attendance. That's often a job, and you can see they have a Google link in the Bitmoji classroom to a Google form that kids can use to take attendance. In the beginning, someone could do a roll call and do attendance, and then it can become a morning job. You could have a greeter. You could have someone who comes into the Zoom or the Google Classroom meeting first and be ready there to greet their friends. They could think about how they want to greet their friends every day. It could be a fun way to build community. Any reminders at the end of the day, rituals that happen throughout the day that someone's in charge of reminding, where they put in the chat box or they present it, or they put it on a Padlet or whatever you're using asynchronously. There could be someone whose job is to remind. There could be someone who's available for questions every day if someone has a question, if they've missed something, if they weren't present for something. One person could be the person who's available for questions. You could have a note taker every day, and kids know during certain times they're taking notes and they're posting them or sharing them with a teacher who can share them with kids who aren't there, or kids who are there and just want some physical notes. You could have a game coordinator. I'm going to share lots of games in a minute, but there's so many online games, and right, I think kids want a chance to be with each other. So you could have a time during the day where you open up rooms for kids to play some online games together. Many schools do a question of the day or a question of the week. This would also be a great ritual to continue, and you could make it a job. Last, Zoom room monitor. You could allow someone to be a room monitor who literally goes between the rooms while you're teaching as a monitor. That way, if something is concerning or someone needs help, that room monitor can be the person who's going between the rooms and can let the teacher know. You could make one student a co-host with you, and then that student could also be a monitor, or you could join a room and make that student the host so that they can go between and they know what room you're in and they can find you. Right, so that would be some ideas. I think there's so many ideas out there. Those are just a few. I hope you use this as an inspiration to kind of think about your own. So that would also be here for kids to see. As I mentioned, attendance, right, was also hyperlinked if you clicked on that to take kids to a Google form where they may want to then, right, you can have each student's name, whether they're here or absent, and you can set that up so you have responses at the end and they're accumulated so you have your attendance all set and ready for you. And that could be something that's someone's job every day. So one way I'm seeing teachers begin to think about their physical classroom is through a Bitmoji. Another way I'm seeing teachers do that, and I shared this quite a bit last year, is to use a virtual book room to create a virtual library. So this is a virtual book room, and there's all links to this so you can get to it that I've created with the help of teachers across the country, a free access to books that are organized into baskets. And we tried to do this because, again, we wanted the physical representation of the classroom to feel familiar, right? So when we're sending kids just lots of links and they're not packaging in the way that they typically look for books, we're not helping them continue to grow as readers, readers who choose what they want to read, readers who have agency to create their reading identities and their reading lives. So using this book room to create a virtual classroom library, you literally can just take baskets and move them in to a virtual classroom library where your kids can begin to find those books. I have a whole set on my website. I'm going to share that link of how to use the book room and how to create a digital classroom library using the book room, because it's really simple. What's most important, and I'm trying to show though, is the system, the structure, and the physical representation of how we organize books in our classrooms is showing up here, which I think is really, really helpful for our kids. One fun thing that you saw kids do, and a teacher kind of put that together, is to allow kids to kind of go on a virtual scavenger hunt to be able to think through, like, how would we find out what's important? How would we figure out what it is we want our kids to be able to look at? So this is an example of a virtual, how to make the virtual information, that's all in here, but you could then have a virtual library scavenger hunt. They could find the title of a book that's funny, or a topic you want to learn about, or the title of a book you can listen to, or the title of a book you're looking forward to reading. And they can share these with each other. So kids can find ways to find new books. It's a way to get them in there, interacting, learning how to use it, because it does take a few steps to be able to do that, but also selling books and sharing the love of reading. So those are some ideas, right, to really think about sort of that visual space and how you would use that visual space in the physical space virtually to get the kids to continue to connect with going to school every day, even if they're not going to that physical space. The virtual space has a lot of the same aspects to it. So other sort of ideas or things that we tried that we really noticed kids loved to think through together is thinking about familiar systems and structures that empower students. So things like your morning and end of day routines, how can you keep those going virtually? Some of those jobs I said could also be beginning and end of day routines, right? That Google Forms for attendance, like I showed. Creating a virtual classroom jobs, right? That was one of the things that was in the Bitmoji. Having a teacher of the day or other things like that you typically do that kids look forward to and they find that's fun. We can keep that stuff alive and well. If you did something like show and tell, it's a great thing to do to build community in the beginning of the year. They could bring something they built, bring something from their home, show us an aspect of their home, all things. Question of the day or of the week would be something else that I showed in that Bitmoji classroom, but you can continue to think about. So creating a community of learners virtually. One idea I've been talking with colleagues about, many of us went and visited students at the end of the year. We could also do these home visits before school starts, either from the sidewalk or virtually, but having that chance to meet one-on-one with our kids could just be that little bit of extra that we do to really create that sense of community virtually. That's some good news is one of the things I had shared. There's a link to that here. This is a link to lots of different morning meeting games, Zoom games. Think about using these games and other things to have virtual recess or free play and crafts, right? These are the spaces that kids normally have to socialize together. So we want to keep those alive and well. One of the things I've noticed on many Zoom or Google Classroom meetings is towards the end when kids know you're going to wrap up, in the chat box, they're all planning how they're going to get on some virtual game together as soon as the class meeting is over. So if they know how to do that with some of these online video games, we could do the same thing with some other kinds of games if we teach them. So that would be a nice option for that. I heard of some teachers, and I got to have the privilege to join some where we ate lunch together. Sometimes it was the whole class in different rooms and broke them out into rooms. Sometimes it was just small groups. But I think keeping that ritual, whether it's every day in small groups or only on certain days, but giving kids the opportunity to eat lunch together. Virtual field trips were just so beautiful and powerful throughout this pandemic. So this first link is looking at a sort of a choice board that a particular teacher shared, Kathleen Sokolowski shared with me, where you can show that kids can choose where they want to go and they can do some writing with it. I wanted you to see that structure because you could use that structure with any kind of field trip that you wanted to do. She was on spring break that week and kids were still going to school on what would have been their spring break. So she did a lot of sort of virtual field trips and trips in general because many kids would have been going somewhere over vacation and now they weren't. Other things I put below here, Scholastic kind of has some tips for virtual field trips in general. And these were a few other websites that have different virtual field trips ideas, but literally if you Google it, you'll be amazed at how much comes up. There's also online versions of a lot of popular games like Boggle and Scrabble and other things you might typically play with your kids. Having a surprise reader, I got to be a surprise reader for a lot of teachers, and that was really fun. Kids looked forward to that and were really engaged in knowing that that was something that was going to happen. I'm in one school that had virtual dance parties on a certain day of the week, and kids really looked forward and liked that. They got to vote on the songs and things like that. If you have spirit days, if you have days where you dress up, things that are themed, keeping a lot of those things alive, I think is fun for us to do. Share funny videos. There's so much online now that are really funny, and it's fun to laugh together. Laughing is really important. And daily class pets, stuffed animals, things kids want to share. I met a lot of pets over those few weeks. And I think it's just a nice way to do something that you couldn't do if we were totally in person. So these are some ideas. I have this to share with you so you can explore those at your own time. But just really think about those rituals, the things that make kids want to run to school every day. And let's think about like, how can we make those come to life in a different way, but virtually? So I'm really thinking about your actual physical space. Can you make virtual backgrounds that look like your space? You might even take a photograph of your actual classroom and use that to make your Bitmoji classroom. You may take several photos of your classroom and different, depending on what lesson, you may have a different virtual background behind you so kids feel like, yeah, we're doing math right now, or we're doing writing, or we're doing reading, but they have a sense of what they're doing. In addition to the physical space, really thinking about predictable and familiar systems and structures, right? Kids want to know how school goes in your classroom. So the more you bring that to life, the better. And then lastly, but not leastly or important, is creating a community of learners, right? We all missed our kids and kids missed each other because they had that community. And our job now is to make sure that if we have to go virtual again next spring, hopefully we don't, but that we have built a community that the kids are going to miss. I hope you got some ideas from this. I hope you continue to share ideas with each other. Let's stay together because I definitely, completely, and continue to believe we are better together. So enjoy these last few weeks of summer if you're still off. But if you have some time or if you're about to go back, these are some things that are on my mind, and I'd love to hear what's on your mind.